Today, we lost an absolute legend. Walkley-winning journalist, author and TV presenter George Negus passed away following a battle with Alzheimer's. His was a phenomenal career spanning more than 50 years.
Known for his sensational moustache and open-collar shirts, George Negus captivated audiences with his searing intelligence and no-nonsense style.
Why do people stop us in the street almost and tell us that Margaret Thatcher isn't just inflexible, she's not just single-minded. On occasion, she's plain pig-headed and won't be told by anyone.
Would you tell me who has stopped you in the street and said that?
Ordinary Britons.
Born in Brisbane in 1942, Negus began his career as a journalist at age 28, writing for the Australian newspaper, his first TV role on the ABC's This Day Tonight, before being hand-picked to join the inaugural 60 Minutes Australia team.
I'm George Negus. I'm George Negus. I'm George Negus.
The show was a ratings juggernaut in the 80s, with a fearless Negus leading the way.
Set out at about 5 o'clock this morning from our base in Algeria to film a Polisario patrol. What we found out is that we're actually part of one.
George went on to become the first host of the ABC's new international current affairs show, Foreign Correspondent, fronting the program from 1992 to 1999.
Do you think that with the new economic freedom that people will want more and more political freedom?
Revered and praised by viewers and colleagues alike, no one intimidated Negus, grilling world leaders from Mikhail Gorbachev to Bob Hawke and the infamous Muammar Gaddafi.
So it's up to the young people to overcome the stupidity of the old people.
In the latter part of his career, George hosted Dateline on SBS and, of course, The Project.
How do you think the Liberal Party will be looking this time tomorrow?
I don't think Tony Abbott's out of it yet. I think the budgie smugglers might do it for him.
As well as 6:30 with George Negus.
We broke new ground, guys. Proud of you.
Negus won a Walkley, a Logie, and in 2015 was made a Member of the Order of Australia for his services to media and conservation.
On television, I'm just like I am. If you think you know me, you do.
After a 5-year battle with dementia, George died peacefully, surrounded by loved ones. He was 82. Negus is survived by his partner Kirsty and sons Ned and Serge.
Our very own Hamish joins us now from Sydney. Hamish, we're so sorry. We know how close you were with him and his family. How is everyone doing?
Look, I had a brief chat this afternoon with Kirsty, George's wonderful wife, and also his son Serge. George was deeply loved and he loved deeply, so of course they're terribly sad, but it's been a long and difficult journey for George and for the family over the last few years. I mean, if you ever want to see and know what true love is through life to the end, it's present in that family. So he was loved right until his last breath.
What about you, mate? How are you doing?
Look, it's been a raw day. I've got to say, I didn't expect the phone call. My dad died 2 weeks ago. I became involved with Dementia Australia through George and Kirsty. They introduced me to them some years ago when Dad first was diagnosed with Parkinson's and then Lewy body. And so the dementia thing has become, something that I believe needs to be talked about a lot more. And I was in a studio recording a podcast about people living with and caring for those with dementia. So it was a bit of a shock to get that call in the studio. George was a titan of journalism, obviously. I think his name is sort of known Australia-wide, but he was a deeply cheery person. He was very kind. He loved taking young journalists under his wing. He was so proud even of being involved with the project back in its early days. He really believed in what the mission was, to get young people talking about serious news and current affairs. And I think true to his own style, he didn't really care what the style was. He just thought you should speak plainly about big and complicated things. And so I know his time here at 10, he took away with him with a great deal of pride, and I feel very lucky to have worked with him.
Yeah, indeed. Speak plainly and unbutton your shirt, I think, was kind of most of the jacket. But this is the thing, you're right. He invented his own style. I can't think of anyone like him before or since, really. Do you think there can be anyone else?
Look, I don't really know the answer to that, but you're right. George had a kind of deep disdain for any kind of journalism that kind of disappeared up its own arse. And he held it as a point of pride that was not what he did. If there was a politician on, a Prime Minister, a President, he would speak to them like an everyday Australian would. And I think that's kind of part of the magic of why he connected so deeply with Australians. He also had immense curiosity. He loved actually telling the stories. He'd often tell you the same stories over and over again. Particularly, so the year that I worked with him on the Negus program here on 10 was the year of the Arab Spring. And so I was being bounced back and forth to Egypt and Tunisia and Libya. And the number of times he said to me, "Did I ever tell you about the time I met Gaddafi?" He really loved sort of sharing those tales. But, you know, I think he just kind of cared about the young people that were working with him. It wasn't kind of for show. It was meaningful. I was writing a eulogy for my dad last week and looking through a bunch of old boxes, and I actually found his book, a copy of which he'd given. I think he gave me 7 copies of this book. And I took a photo and sent it to Kirsty's wife. It said, "Hi, this cheapskate gift is not ego-driven. Really would appreciate your reaction to the bloody thing, G." He just kind of wanted to connect.
You mentioned the show that you did with him at Channel 10, that 6:30 news show, and that was a bit of a news revolution at 10. Like, it's easy to forget how significant that show was. Of all the things that show achieved, though, I think his sign-off in the last episode, when the show had been cancelled, is one of my favourite bits of Negus television ever. Let's have a look.
There you go. 200 nights later, that's us. A wild and wonderful ride while it lasted. Unfortunately, not enough of you buggers watched us off for that. It's your fault. Just joking.
No one else can say that. Like, how is he able to get away with that sort of stuff?
Look, I think George had a cheeriness. You saw that in that clip, and he actually had that, you know, all the way along, right through his illness. You know, even to the point where I still continued to visit him in recent years, and even at the point at which he was becoming non-verbal, he still had that smile. You know, you'd clock him, the eyes would light up, you'd get a hug. There was a sort of sunny side to George, which I think sat maybe at first a bit uncomfortably with the seriousness of the topics that he covered, but I think actually was the perfect mechanism for delivery of it all. You knew with him, if you watched him, that no matter what or how difficult the story was, how heavy the theme might be, that he'd still give it to you in quite a human way. I think that's a rare skill. It's something that I guess I have sort of taken away from working with him. You know, we sort of talk about delivering the news differently at the project, and I think in many ways it kind of was a little bit inspired by the way he did things early on. He was on the desk so regularly right at the start, and he was genuinely a mentor, I think, to the likes of Charlie, and loved Dave Hughes and Carrie and everyone else that was passing through. He really loved being a part of that, and I think he felt very proud of being able to somehow hand on some of his skills.
Hamish, we love you, and thank you so much for telling us about your friend.
Thank you for having me on. It's a privilege to be able to say something about a man that is a genuine giant of Australian journalism and just a wonderful, great bloke.